In the relentless heat of a desert under two blazing suns, the barren landscape stretched for miles, seemingly endless. The golden dunes rolled like waves, frozen in time, shimmering under the searing sky. The wind howled, carrying the echoes of ancient secrets buried deep beneath the sand. On this forsaken planet, forgotten by the universe, a band of survivors called a home. Their fight for survival was a battle against the very world they inhabited. Kor stood atop a tall sand mound, his face weathered by years in the harsh sun. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and focused, beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. Below him, half buried in the shifting sands, was the wreckage of a mining ship. It had long been scavenged, the remains twisted and warped under the relentless heat. Kor had come hoping to find something of value, but there was nothing. The wreckage had been picked clean. His heart sank, and as he wiped the sweat from his brow, he prepared to return to the settlement, a small cluster of makeshift homes visible far to the south. But just as he turned, something caught his eye, a flicker, a glint of light that did not belong. He paused, his instincts kicking in. Out here in the vast emptiness, things were often not what they seemed. The desert was a trickster, its heat creating false images and illusions. Yet this felt different. This was no mirage. His pulse quickened as he moved down the dune, careful with each step, his boots sinking into the soft sand. At the base, he saw a figure lying motionless. It was a woman, or something like one. She was unlike anyone Kor had ever seen. Her skin shimmered iridescent, shifting in color like the twilight sky. She was tall with long limbs, and her features were unnaturally perfect, too symmetrical, too precise to be human. Her face, serene and untouched by the desert's cruelty, radiated a purity that seemed out of place in this barren wasteland. Her long, silken hair, a deep violet, lay tangled in the sand, but there was no trace of the desert's dust on her, no sign that she had been here long. Kor approached slowly, his breath caught in his chest. She was so foreign, so inexplicably out of place, that for a moment he thought he might be seeing things. The wind shifted, carrying a scent toward him, floral and metallic, like a distant, forgotten memory. He could hardly believe it. It was a scent that had no place here. He instinctively reached for the dagger at his side, though he knew it would be useless against whatever she was. Before he could make any move, the woman's eyelids fluttered open. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the dimming light, and Kor froze. The look she gave him was piercing, as though she could see into his very soul. For a long moment, neither moved. The world around them felt still, as if even the desert was holding its breath. Kor felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability, as though he was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. Then her voice, soft and delicate, echoed inside his mind. "Zura!" He recoiled. Her voice hadn't come from her lips, but from within his own consciousness. It was alien, not quite sound, more like a presence. The word felt alive in his mind. "Zura!" He repeated the name aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Her gaze didn't leave him. There was no fear in her eyes, only an ancient, unfathomable depth. For the first time, Kor felt the weight of her being. She was no mere traveler, no stranded soul like him. She was something far greater, something more dangerous. Cautiously, Kor knelt beside her, his hand trembling as he reached for her shoulder. Before his fingers touched her, a powerful sensation gripped him. The desert, the very earth beneath them, seemed to tremble. In an instant, his vision blurred, and he was no longer in the desert. Images flooded his mind, towering crystal spires rising from an endless sea of light, beings of iridescent beauty moving with effortless grace. He felt an alien warmth on his skin, smelled strange flowers on the wind, and heard music not from instruments but from the very world itself. He felt Zara's essence woven into the fabric of that reality. The vision faded as quickly as it had come. Kor gasped, his breath coming in sharp, shallow pulls. Zara's eyes locked onto his, and he stumbled backward, shaken, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "You're not like them," she said softly. Zara didn't elaborate, and Kor was left to process what he had witnessed. A glimpse into another world, a world that seemed more real than his own. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her, even as the world seemed to shift around them. There was something undeniable about her presence, a force he couldn't fully understand. And then, just as he thought it might be too much to bear, a low rumble shook the ground beneath them. Zara's eyes glowed with an intensity that Kor could feel in his bones. Something had stirred within the desert. The wind began to rise, sand swirling in violent gusts. But Zara stood unmoved, her aura glowing brighter, commanding the storm to cease. The sand began to slow, the air thick with tension, and the rumble faded. "We must leave," she said quietly, her voice now calm, almost too calm. Kor knew this desert, its relentless winds, its unyielding heat. He had learned to survive here. But Zara had brought something with her, something that didn't belong. She was a mystery, and from the way the settlers reacted when they saw her, they saw it too. As the two of them walked toward the distant settlement, Kor could feel eyes on them, eyes filled with suspicion. Zara, silent as ever, walked beside him, her presence radiating calm but hiding something deeper. Whatever she was, whatever she carried with her, she was far more than he could understand. They reached the settlement, a ragged collection of shelters made from salvaged materials. The harsh winds had weathered the settlement, but the settlers had learned to survive. The first person to approach was Caden, the self-appointed leader of the settlement. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned Zara. Kor could feel the weight of the moment. "What is she?" Caden's voice cut through the silence, his tone full of suspicion. Kor glanced at Zara. He didn't know how to explain her. "I found her in the desert," he said slowly. Caden raised an eyebrow. "Not from here, huh?" He wasn't asking. He was stating it like an accusation. Kor clenched his jaw. "She's not a thing to be traded," he snapped. Caden laughed darkly. "Not for sale? You think she's worth something more? Or just another pretty face?" Kor's hand hovered near the blade at his side, but Zara remained still. Her presence, like a storm about to break, was undeniable. Then the ground beneath them shook again. Sand trembled, the very desert seemingly alive. The wind howled. The world turned violent. The settlers scattered in panic. Zara's violet eyes flared with power, her presence commanding the desert to halt. The storm stopped, as suddenly as it had started, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Caden's fear was palpable. "She's dangerous," Kor warned. "She's a threat." But Kor knew what he felt. Zara wasn't a threat. She was something far more complicated, more than he could ever understand. Kor turned to Zara, but she was already moving. "We need to go," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. And so they left, walking away from the settlement, toward the endless desert, towards whatever unknown awaited them. As Kor and Zara trudged through the vast desert, the world around them seemed to close in. The sand stretched endlessly, a seemingly insurmountable sea of shifting dunes, the desert both a refuge and a grave. Kor's thoughts raced. He had crossed paths with many people in his life, each with their own stories, their own burdens, but Zara was different. The power she held was beyond comprehension, far more than he could grasp in the moment. For the first time since they had met, he allowed himself to truly look at her. Zara's quiet presence had an undeniable intensity, a stillness that made the harsh desert feel almost subdued in comparison. The violet hue of her eyes was a constant reminder of her otherworldly nature, as though she were not truly from this realm at all. Every step she took seemed to bend the very air around her, as if the desert itself acknowledged her authority. And yet, despite her power, she carried an air of sadness, an unspoken grief that hung over her like a storm cloud. Kor couldn't help but feel the weight of it. What had she lost? What had she left behind to become this? An alien with powers that could bring either salvation or destruction. And why had fate led him to her? He had once been just a scavenger, scraping by in the unforgiving landscape, never questioning the silence of the desert. Now, everything felt different. The desert wasn't silent anymore, it was alive, humming with an energy Kor couldn't explain, a force that seemed to pulse alongside Zara. As the twin moons hung low in the sky, casting their pale light across the dunes, Kor glanced at Zara, his mind filled with questions he knew she would never answer. But there was something in her gaze, a fleeting moment of vulnerability, that told him she, too, was searching for something that could undo the burden she carried, something that might set her free from the ghosts that haunted her every step. The desert around them seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. The winds had calmed, but Cor could feel the tension between them, an invisible thread pulling tighter and tighter. What had she meant when she said her path home had been sealed? Who were those beings who had come for her? And why did she insist on protecting him? He was no hero, no savior, just a man trying to survive. Yet, Zara had entrusted him with her life, and somehow he had come to see her as more than a stranger. In a world where nothing was certain, she was his only certainty. But certainty, Cor realized, was a dangerous thing in the desert. The very ground beneath his feet could betray him at any moment. The wind could change, and the sands could swallow everything in their path. Zara, however, was not bound by the same rules. She moved through the desert as though she were part of it, as though she could summon the winds themselves to do her bidding. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Cor knew, deep down, that whatever Zara was running from, or whatever she had left behind, it was not something they could outrun. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink, but the light did little to ease the unease that gnawed at Cor's insides. Zara had stopped, her gaze fixed on something beyond the dunes, her expression unreadable. She had stopped searching. Cor realized she had found what she was looking for. Her voice broke through the silence. "They're close." Cor's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't realized how much he had been dreading this moment, the moment when the past would finally catch up to them. He had always known that something was coming, but now, standing on the edge of this desert, it felt inevitable. The world they had left behind, the chaos, the fear, the enemies who pursued Zara, it was all converging here. Zara turned to him, her eyes meeting his for the first time in hours. "We fight." Cor nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. There was no turning back. They had no choice but to face what was coming. Together. Whatever Zara was, wherever she was from, she was no longer just an enigma in the desert. She was a storm, and Cor had chosen to stand beside her. As they prepared for the confrontation ahead, Cor realized that the desert no longer felt like an enemy. It was a canvas, a backdrop to battle that was about to unfold, a battle between Zara's past and whatever future they could forge together. Cor was no longer just a survivor. He was part of her story, and she was part of his. The winds began to pick up again, and the sand swirled in the distance. The storm was coming, but Cor was ready, whatever secrets the desert held. He was determined to uncover them. With Zara at his side, he would face whatever came next, no matter the cost.